Hi, I'm Bobby Halton, and welcome to Trusted Voices. Today we're going to be visiting with Chief John Buckman. John's had a long career in the American Fire Service spanning 47 years. Holy mackerel. Volunteer Fire Chief of the Year at one point in time,
Yes, sir.
President of the I Chiefs, and still active with the German Township Fire Department.
Somewhat active, yes.
And still active and full-time employed with the State Fire Marshal's Office as the Chief of Training Director for the state of Indiana. Right. So John has had tremendous impact in the American Fire Service over the years. He's participated in virtually every level of the fire service, and you've probably seen many of his photographs across America. Currently, he's the editor-in-chief of Fire Chief magazine.
No, I'm the leadership content advisor.
Leadership content advisor.
firechief.com.
Okay, with new titles with the digital world, right? But you do a monthly column.
Yeah.
Yeah, which you can read at firechiefmagazineonline.com.
Yeah.
So take advantage of that. Please take advantage of John's wisdom. It's great stuff. And John will also, a frequent instructor, has been participating at FDIC for the last 40 years, and teaching this year. You're doing.
I'm doing reigniting the passion.
Oh, I was going to say reigniting the fire, and right out of the fire marshal's business there.
Yeah, right. No. It's as you've been around a while, or in this job, it's always hard to sustain that passion that you had when you first came in. So it's take a look at how we can sustain our enthusiasm, the thrill of the job, and keep that enthusiasm going.
And I think that's a really important course, and we want to talk about John's history in a minute. But that's a neat point, because everything ebbs and flows in life, and you're jazzed up about something, you're excited, and then you're in it. And things happen. We have children, we have grandchildren, we have jobs. Our jobs change. And so we get pulled, and sometimes that passion, as you said, can get stretched among other competing interests. And I think that's okay. You know what I mean? And reigniting it, I like that, because it's almost like you can picture it. You blow on the fire, and that fire comes back up. And it's like a new fire.
Right.
Which there's a 12-step program for, and we're both in it.
Right.
So tell us about young John Buckman, Indiana boy.
I was born and raised in Evansville, Indiana, by my parents. My dad is deceased. My mom is still alive.
Wow.
I have two brothers. I have 4 girls. I have 5 grandchildren, 6 grandchildren. Oh, that's terrible. Missed one. And I have 1 great grandson.
Wow.
So married to Leslie for 24 years, coming up on 25.
Wow.
She is the greatest wife that I could ever ask for, because she's always been a supporter, she's always been loyal, and she's my best friend.
And let's go there for a second, and when we talk about the fire service in particular, especially in your job, you travel a great deal, whether it's nationally, and even when you're home, your job takes you to various parts of the state of Indiana all the time. How important is a good, strong marriage to making that work?
It impacts a big part of your happiness. It's not fun being alone. You need a companion. You need that friend. You need that person that you can talk to, that you can tell anything to, and won't go anywhere. That will also have your back, but will also be in front of you to protect you from those that come straight at you. I believe that Leslie has always been there for me. She's been a good supporter, and I have no doubt that in my worst days that she'll be the one to help pick me up.
Wow, that's great. Any advice to young firefighters how to keep that part of the passion alive? How to keep a marriage solid?
Absolutely. After 3 to 5 years of being married, go to a marriage counselor.
Really?
Because if you ask Leslie, she will tell you we are still married because of marriage counseling.
Wow.
We went to see a guy named Greg Gordon at about 3 to 5 years, because she hated me and I hated her. I didn't pick my underwear up and she didn't do the dishes, or whatever those little things were that went from some little thing to some huge thing that were just grating at each other's nerves on a constant basis. And she said, let's go, and I said, okay. He told me to read the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Wow.
I realized that women shop. It's acceptable. It's in their genes. I don't mean in their blue jeans, I mean in their genes. And as a man, I didn't understand that. I didn't understand that when she goes to shop, she wants to go walk around. I go in to buy what I wanted to buy. And the other thing that Greg Gordon told me was, don't try to change her because you may not like what she changes into.
Wow.
You married her, you fell in love with her for a reason. Remember that reason. So I tell the young people today, as one, you're marrying your best friend. If you're not marrying your best friend, you're in trouble. Leslie will also tell you that I didn't trust her when we first got married. That was one of those points of contention when we were, first building our relationship. It took me a while. I'm not proud of that, but it did. It took me a while to be able to trust her, to tell her whatever, and realize that she would always be there for me. But I tell the young people, you're not going to marry for sex. You're going to marry for your best friend, because the sex is going to go away. No matter what you think, it's going to go away. And so you gotta marry for that companionship, for that person who's going to be there to pick your underwear up off the floor, and you're going to do the dishes from the man's perspective, or at least in my perspective, and you're in a true partnership. So it is about asking for that help and getting some help.
Yeah, and to back you up, the folks that are listening today probably remember Ron White's great comedy routine, "You can't fix stupid." So,
Yeah.
Make sure you like the person you marry.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
If you want to be in it for the long haul.
Right.
So, early career. Where did you start off in the fire service? How'd you get going? What brought you into training in the fire marshal's office? Where'd you start, John? What was your first?
I was a volunteer firefighter at German Township, still am. Not as active as I used to be, because as you said, I'm not home. I usually leave on Monday to go to Indianapolis, and sometimes come home on Friday, and may not come home till Saturday. Just depends on what's going on. But we lived about 2 blocks from the fire station, heard the siren go off on top of the fire station. Myself and 2 other guys, 2 other friends, decided to join the fire department. At that time we were only 17. There was beer in the fire station, so we were not allowed to be in the fire station without an adult there. But we had a guy named Red Oates who helped us get on the fire department, and we said, we'll go up the fire station and we'll wax the trucks and we'll clean the trucks and do all this stuff in the summertime. And we did that. We didn't go drink the beer out of the refrigerator, but then he got suspended because they caught us in the fire station without an adult being there. He hung around, and he was very active, and stayed with the fire department in most of our careers. But it was like, well, we had this rule, but yet all we wanted to do was help. So once I did that, I was young when they elected me to be a fire chief, and it was the old guys that elected me to be fire chief at like 24 years of age.
Oh, wow.
And I'd been on about 7 years. I'd done a lot of training. We were a very well-run fire department. In 1967, my German Township Fire Department was featured in an IFSTA ground cover firefighting book.
Oh, wow.
One of my firefighters at that time, Wayne Herman, believes he invented the Foda tank. I'm not sure if he did or not. But we had a 500 gallon per minute Coventry Climax portable pump that you and I could carry 500 gallons per minute at 150 psi.
Wow.
We bought, in 1967, we bought a rear suction engine from Universal Fire Apparatus in Logansport, Indiana. Except they didn't put a piece of hard suction in there for the rear suction. They put a piece of collapsible hose. So they brought, I wasn't on the fire department then, so they tell me this story. We had a fire at a popcorn factory. And they took that engine there, they hooked it up to the hydrant, and all of a sudden that pipe started coming out of the back of the truck and eventually blew off.
That's classic.
So they had to go back, and Red, who was a mechanic by trade, had to go up and tell the fire apparatus manufacturer how to make that rear suction a true rear suction and put a pipe in there.
Wow.
And
wow.
so from that perspective, that's what those guys were all about, training. Even that we had a rule that you had to attend 51% of the training, and if you couldn't make training, you had to sign the excused absence sheet. Was on the bulletin board.
Wow.
My relationship about training occurred in 1979. We're at a Silver Bell Tavern fire. It's closed for the evening. We have fire coming out of the roof. I have people inside the burning building. I learned this afterwards. The guy standing at the engine, at the hydrant, operating the engine, says, "Looks like we got this knocked."
Oh.
When the roof collapsed, and I sent 9 firefighters to the hospital.
Oh.
I will never, and I tell people this all the time, I will never forget knocking on that door. "Ma'am, you need to get up. We need to go to the hospital." your husband's in the hospital. I will never forget my best friend who I grew up with having a titanium rod put in his leg because it was broken. I realized after that it was my fault. When the arson investigator showed up, I wanted him to blame the owner of that building. I told him it was an arson fire, and he said, "John, I'll decide what kind of fire what started this fire." He determined the fire started in a light fixture above the pool table. Well, guess what? There's 2 slides of that particular fire. There's a hole in the roof, and it's right above where that pool table was at. So, so I know he was right. I know, but I wanted to blame somebody else, and afterwards I realized I'm the one to blame.
Where did you go? How did you get into the fire marshal's office? How did you land that? What were you doing? What were you doing at that time to support yourself?
I was working at a company called ARA Services, a vending machine, doing that kind of stuff, a supervisor there. I was on the way to work one morning, and I was going through a controlled intersection. I had the green light, and a drunk ran the red light. T-boned me, broadsided me. I wasn't injured. I mean, I was bruised up, but I didn't go to the hospital or nothing. And while I was off, I ran into the state fire marshal. I said, "Hey, I might be looking for a job." And he said, "I don't have one right now." But about 30 days later, he called me up and he said, "Hey, the guy in your area has announced he's going to quit. Would you be interested in submitting an application?" Submitted application. That was in about 1985, and got hired in code enforcement, and did code enforcement for like 20 years. During that time, still active at German Township. In 1988, went to a meeting in Loudoun County, Virginia with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. They were reforming the volunteer committee. I think my board of directors had no idea what they were doing when I said, "Hey, can I go to that meeting?" And
you had no idea what you were doing.
Yeah, you're right. I had no idea what I was doing. And the director of the Loudoun County Fire and Rescue was Billy Goldfeather.
Oh my goodness.
And in 1988, he and I became friends. In 1991, I became the chairman of the committee. He became the vice chair of the committee. In 1994, we formed the volunteer section with the International Association of Fire Chiefs. Billy Still was the vice chair. And I think probably in about 1996, then he moved on to doing other things. And then in 1996, I decided I wanted to run for president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs. In 1999, got selected for second vice president, then moved up to the chair in 2001, August of 2001. As president, just a few days before September 11th.
Yeah, so you're the president of the I-Chiefs during 9/11. Had to be daunting. I mean, still, I don't think it's easy for anyone to understand 343 lives.
No.
It's overwhelming. It's almost incomprehensible, the amount of tragedy and the depth of that loss to any organization, to any profession. How did you navigate that? I mean, you know what I mean? It had to be overwhelming because you're obviously at the White House. You're in the national spotlight suddenly, and
without any preparation.
Well, yeah, there's no handbook for that.
Right.
Thank God too in the process. So talk about that. But you're the president of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and it's 9/11.
It was odd. I was actually on the phone at home with my feet up on my desk in my house, and talking to Rich Marinucci, who at that time was chief of Farmington Hills, Michigan, and he goes, "Turn the TV on. There's a big fire in New York City." And I turned the TV on and I said, "How does that big of a fire get started, or how does a fire get that big during daylight hours in New York?" A couple minutes later, saw the second plane hit the second tower, and now we know what happened and why it happened. I was actually getting ready to go to the Delaware Fire Chiefs Association conference, getting ready to catch a plane. Obviously, all that went down. The executive director of the International Association of Fire Chiefs, Gary Breeze, was in Colorado. Obviously, nobody is traveling. There's nobody getting anywhere. Fortunately, we had the Hazardous Materials Committee with guys like John Eversole from Chicago was meeting in the IFC headquarters, so we could deploy them to key places in Washington, D.C. to make contact, to be the fire service liaison. That was before IMAT teams and all the things that we do today. We deployed a chief of Hull, Massachusetts, Nick Russo, down to New York to see what kind of assistance they would need.
Because we often forget that while Pete Gansey and his guys are battling the World Trade Center, Ed Plogger and his troops are
at the Pentagon.
Right. So we've got the two most significant events in the history of American terrorism, and basically fire service involvement in terrorism ever, and still standing, and you're in the middle of this.
And you mentioned Chief Gansey.
Sure.
One of the ironic things is that Billy Goldfeder swore me in as president of the National Association of Fire Chiefs at our conference. And this guy comes up to me and he gives me a box and he says, you need anything? Call me. And he leaves and I go, who is he? He gives me cufflinks. He's got FDNY and a tie cap clasp. And he goes, that's Pete Gansey. I'm thinking, here's the fire chief of the largest fire department in the world and this little volunteer fire chief. And he wants to help me. And as a result, Commissioner Thomas Von Essen and I became very close friends. We made several trips to New York City. And the one thing that Commissioner Von Essen said was that the only difference between German Township and FDNY is scale. Apparatus, equipment, money, people, it's just scale.
Mission,
it's the same
values.
Yeah,
it's the same problem. So, Chief, post 9/11, you've got all the responsibilities of the IAFC, which are many that a lot of people don't understand. But the sitting president of the IAFC is responsible for traveling to all of the different functions that the IFC has around the country, and there are probably 12 or 15 significant events that the IFC manages throughout the country, whether it's the Metro Chiefs meeting or the Southwestern, and so you've got all that on your plate, plus the obviously staggering line of duty death issues that were going on in New York City and everything that subsequent to that with health and recovery and all of that. How did you balance that with still having you still have a full-time job with the state of Indiana, and you're still, at that time, I believe you were still you were still the chief of German Township. So you've got these three incredibly demanding hats on at one time, and I often hear people talk about being overwhelmed and not having what today the word is bandwidth, which in our day it was horsepower.
Right.
Now it's bandwidth. I like horsepower.
Right.
So where did you find the strength and how did you manage that level of responsibility and still maintain your sanity and your personality and your family? Because you did.
Well, it was not about me, it's about we. My dad told me that a long time ago. It's not about you, it's not about I, it's about we. And whether it was the executive director of the IFC, Gary Breeze, the staff at the IFC, my assistant chiefs at German Township that ran the fire department without me, that made good decisions, that my wife got to meet President Bush during the tenure, so she had some thrills there. She got to go to Hawaii on one of the trips. She got some benefit out of me being president. But it became, it did become all absorbing. It became, that's what you do every day when you get up. I jokingly say that on September 11th, the night of September 11th, I called the IFC and said, okay, I'm going to bed. It's like 10:30 at night because we were keeping the IFC office open. And I think back on that now thinking, how silly was that? But it's because they wanted to get a hold of you. We were doing conference calls, making decisions. We were having requests, firefighters from all over the country calling, saying, hey, I want to go, I want to respond, want to go. We wrote a letter, we wrote a position statement, so to speak, telling people don't self-dispatch.
The self-deployment.
Don't self-deploy. You're creating more problems. New York has it under control. Ed Plogger did a great job at the Pentagon. The one thing that happened at the Pentagon, which one of those stories that is very seldom told, is that they're actually called for battalion chiefs from fire departments 200 miles away to respond to the Pentagon, like on day 4 and day 5, because the local fire battalion chiefs, they were done.
Right.
Long before we had IMAT teams and all this stuff that we have now as a result of 9/11, we were putting it together piece by piece. And part of some of the things that grew out of that is what we do today.
Well, and a lot of folks don't know the unsung heroes during 9/11 were Danny Nigro and Al Turi and that group of men that they put together, Johnny Norman, who came together and quickly understood where they were, what they needed, and were smart enough and humble enough to ask for and get the right people on the ground there. And I know you were a big part of that. Those are all friends of mine, and I remember, being down there at Metro Tech and seeing you popping through and other people popping through and seeing that support happen. And that was a really interesting time for the fire service, because at that point, and I think since that point, we are the fire service. It's no longer, I'm a union guy or I'm a volunteer guy, because the volunteer men and women from New Jersey and Connecticut and Long Island that came in, just as the departments did for Ed, made such a difference, and were such pros, and you couldn't tell who was FDNY and who wasn't down there, and no one cared.
Right.
More importantly, no one cared.
We had a job to do, let's do it.
Right. It's what are you qualified to do? What's your skill set? And go here, talk to this guy. And thank you for doing that. Thank you for being there. That was important. So your year gets up at IFC, and then you've got the post year where you help the next guy, right, or gal struggle through and maintain their sanity for a year, and you go back to your normal life where you're writing and speaking and teaching and doing everything that you do. So how was that transition? Because it's interesting, and I think the IFC has a good model there for people to look at, because we spoke about it today in our little group that we have, and we were talking about the fact that the Stoics used to talk about the story of the lawyer who dies in court and how tragic that is, and there comes a time when you walk away, or at least semi-retire, or go into other pursuits. For you, I know you're still working full time, but your real pursuit, your real love, and what you're amazing at is photography. And I don't think a lot of people know that about you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that photography I've done since high school. I got a black and white picture in high school of a pie in the face, and it was right at the time the pie hit the face. It's
the pie is going.
Oh yeah, it's all over and it's in focus. It's well lit. And that's what really hooked me on photography.
Wow. So it wasn't a blazing fire shot? You gotta come up with a better story. That's a fire show. You got a guy getting meringued.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. But transitioning, Leslie would tell you, as we're walking out of the hotel room the morning after when the transition has occurred, Randy Bergman is now the president, I'm whistling as we're walking down the hall. And Leslie goes, I haven't heard that in a while. I go, yeah, because they're not going to call me.
Right.
They're going to call Randy. And my transition, I knew my hire date and I knew my fire date. I was ready to get hired, and I knew when I was no longer going to be in charge. And for me, the ego was there while it was important, but once it was over, it was over. And a lot of things Ronnie Coleman told me a lot. Right before I got elected, right before I started to serve. Write down what you do, because nobody's really going to care, just you. And I did. I could tell you things that I did that nobody knows about, but it was for me. And it was for the fire service, and the fire service maybe is better off because of that.
So, talk real briefly, if you wouldn't mind sharing, some of the things that you'd like to offer out as just advice for keeping your sanity, dealing with complexity like you did, and then being graceful as you were, because I think we see a lot of, especially in our elite political class, where they cling, they leave but they don't go away, they can't let go of that limelight and that spotlight, and they clearly hate to share it, but they never want to leave it.
Right.
Whereas I think the IFC has a great model of it's almost a great change of command model. It's almost militaristic the way they do it, where you change command, it's formal, it's official, and you ride away. Rich Marinucci did it, Chief DiPolo did it, you've done it, Rhoda May's doing it right now, and I think it's a good thing.
You do miss it. You can't say that you don't miss it. You miss being in the know, knowing the secret things. There's very few secrets in this world. The thing that I have done, that I've been able to do over the years, I graduated from Automobile University, where we use audio tapes to learn and teach and things like, because you're in the car a lot. As, that's what they call it, Automobile University. But what I learned is that you got to feed yourself with positive stuff. Probably 3 years ago, I was driving to Spartanburg, South Carolina for some research burns. I think you were
The Kill the Flesh Order guys, sure.
And
Andy Starnes.
I realized then that I'm allowing all this new stuff that's on all these television stations to just poison my brain. And so I committed at that time to quit doing that. Start feeding myself with positive stuff. Sort of like eating an apple every day.
Right.
It's good for you.
Right.
Versus eating stuff that's not good for you. Eating stuff with high fat and that sort of thing. So what I've tried to do for the last couple of years, and I've been successful in trying to reinvigorate myself, re-energize myself, by feeding myself with positive things, with comedy. You mentioned Ron White a little earlier, Jeff Foxworthy, those kind of guys. They just make you laugh. And a guy named C.W. Metcalf presented at Fire Rescue 2 years. He wrote a book called Lighten Up. And I remember what he said. I have these red foam noses that we gave out last year at our little meeting that we're at here. And I've used that. I created a class, and I make fire chiefs put on this red nose and smile at themselves and laugh. Because if you don't laugh, what are you doing? You're sad. Right. Well, when you smile, if you just fake a smile, there are certain chemicals in your body called endorphins that start to go through your body just by making yourself smile. And one of the things that CW said was, pull up to a stop sign or a stoplight and look over at that person on your right or your left and just crack a big old smile at them. And he said, and they will look at you like you're weird, but eventually they're going to smile. And that's really so important. And you just did it there. You smile.
Sure.
And when you do that, you give yourself good positive chemicals in your body. That's what I think that we have to do. We have to feed ourselves with positive kind of things in order to keep us on a positive frame of mind, because there is so much negative stuff in this world today. There's so much stress. Life is so difficult. Life is short. We have a very short life when we think about it. And if you're unhappy, try to figure out how to make yourself happy. If you can't make yourself happy, go ask for some help. In this day and age, we know about suicide, we know about our health risk. It's tough out there, and you may not be able to solve your personal problems by yourself. If you think you need help, ask for help.
And firefighters will be happy to help you.
Absolutely.
And they'll be smiling about it.
I hope so.
We both know it.
They will, yes.
We've been there.
Right.
So, one last question, and we'll let you go. What's the greatest opportunity you see right now for the fire service? So what's the next thing, Chief?
I really think the research that we're doing, the scientifically based research, not your opinion, not my opinion, we didn't create this in a garage. I think the scientific research that we're doing will help change the fire service. We have to accept that it's not all about what we think, it is about what we can prove to be right.
Wow, that's some serious insight. Well, Chief, on behalf of the fire service, I'd like to say to you, we have career and volunteer firefighters, and for many years we had career and volunteer firefighters. You kind of broke that ceiling in 2001 because we were firefighters, and our leader, the man that was representing us by consensus, by choice, representing his peers, was a volunteer, a lifetime volunteer. And today with volunteerism on the wane, and I don't think because people aren't interested in volunteering, I think because two things. I think they don't realize how much you get out of it. It's so rewarding. And I also think that just economically and socially, it's tough. It's just tough to balance, because the economy is what it is, and the two-income issue is just what it is. There's very few folks that can survive on one income. You were there, and you continue to be there. And I think, I predict that volunteer firefighters are going to see a resurgence. I think we're going to come back. I think we're going to come back with a vengeance. I think it's everything ebbs and flows in life, and I think we're starting to see that groundswell in certain communities. Obviously, in some places we're struggling and we're losing people, but in other places it seems to be coming back to life, and in no small part due to your efforts and your continued involvement and your example. And the balance that you've brought to the fire service.
Well, and I agree with you. I think Volunteerism can be successful if we have leadership with the right attitude, because people want to do things that help other people. They want to have fun. They want to know it's worthwhile, and they want to know it's appreciated. And if we have leaders that treat people under those circumstances, we'll have volunteer staff fire departments with untold number of people, because they're treated properly and they're treated with respect.
Chief, thank you so much for visiting with us today. I'm Bobby Halton, and this is Trusted Voices, and today we've been visiting with Chief John Buckman.